This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this is our 2025-26 NBA Western Conference preview. As always, we love to get everybody geeked up and ready for the upcoming NBA season, which is going to take place in about a week and a half time frame. So, this is it, man. This is when we get it popping. Just fresh off of a great preview of the Eastern Conference with our special guest, Dan Favale of Hardwood Knocks, man. So now Shaw and I take over the ship and we guide you right into the Western Conference. With that being said, I'm rolling out the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, the Warren Shaw? Are you ready to talk about the Western Conference?
I am, my guy, and nice to be in a more familiar setting for me, talking hoops with you in this space, having a lot of fun here with the Western Conference. But as you alluded to, our Eastern Conference preview is doing really good on our YouTube channel, so make sure you check that out with Dan Favale. Does an amazing job over at Bleach Report and his Ozone podcast, Hardwood Knocks. But yeah, brother, this is going to be an interesting one. And, to give everybody like the lay of the land, we basically both put forth our rankings. And then cumulatively, we more or less then have to re-rank based on our individual scores. So my opinion ranks the team up. CL's opinion might have ranked the team up. And I was really the Debbie Downer for this one.
We Venn diagrammed this thing, bro.
Yeah.
Shout out to the Venn diagram. We really put emphasis on where the circles meet.
And there's going to be some people who are pissed. They're going to feel like we're disrespecting their teams, but to kind of air quote, Kendrick, somebody got to do it, and we can't all be playoff contenders. And so that's what's going to come forth here in this Western Conference preview.
Got a great show on tap. Obviously, Shaw and I are going to break down the Western Conference, get you ready for this upcoming NBA season. As always, we appreciate all of our listeners, young, old, indifferent, the novice to the elite of the elites. We appreciate everybody who chimes in, listens, throws in comments, gives us perspective and thought. Man, we appreciate you. This is why we've been here, and we continue to keep doing what we do. So as always, be sure to get my man at The Warren Shaw. You can get at me at GameFace Lee, the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. You can go to www.thebaselineNBA.com to check out not just this episode, but also all of the episodes that we've got archived in the Batcave. If you see us on the YouTube channel, we like to say hello to you and yours. And respectfully, you see that blue and white logo. That means we rock with the 19 Media Group family. 19 Media Group, we run in these content streets. So we encourage everybody to go to www.19mediagroup.com to not only check us out, but also the family of great content creators that are putting out great shows for your listening pleasure. No matter what it is, 19 Media Group has got you covered. So definitely go and check them out. And as always, man, we encourage everybody to continue to support the Baseline. Be sure to go to our website. You can always catch paraphernalia and gear there that you can order from. So when the NBA season is ready to rock and roll, or we have one of our watch parties, you know what I'm saying? We'd like to see our peoples representing the Baseline brand. Before we get into the goods, which is discussing the Western Conference, we got to make sure people know that it's Raycon's anniversary. What better way to celebrate than a deal with the Everyday Buds Classic? They're now 20% off. So it's the perfect time to get your hands on these reliable, super comfy, and easy to take anywhere. And you'll see why, because they are a fan favorite since day one. The Everyday Earbuds are classic, loaded with upgrades, active noise cancellation, multi-point connectivity, so you can pair with two devices at once, and an ergonomic fit that actually stays put no matter what you're doing. Over 3 million customers already love Raycons, and they come with a 30-day happiness guarantee. So if you don't love them, returns are as easy, and you have nothing to lose. The Baseline boys love their Raycons, and we think you will too. So go to buyraycon.com/baseline to get 20% off the Everyday Earbuds Classic. That's buyraycon.com/baseline to get 20% off. Coming up, Sean and I start breaking down the Western Conference. Don't go anywhere. Time now for the Baseline Boys to break down the Western Conference. And as always, we like to start from the bottom and work our way up. And with that being said, everybody knows how we do our thing, man. We tier up these teams. We basically classify them between the lottery teams, the play-in teams, teams in the middle of the pack, and ultimately the teams that we think will be the contenders in the Western Conference. So let's get right into it, Shaw. We'll start off with the lottery teams. And it's interesting because before we got on and we started, hashing out, how many teams we think realistically would be considered as lottery bound, I had maybe one or two teams less than, just simply because we understand that the teams that we both agree on certainly will probably wind up in that mix again. But we've added two additional teams. And after our conversation in my head, I'm thinking, you know what? It's kind of logical to say that because not everybody is going to be play-in eligible. Not everybody is, rising to the top, so to speak. And so we have the Portland Trailblazers, Sacramento Kings, Utah Jazz, and the New Orleans Pelicans. And so I'll quickly start this. I want to start with the New Orleans Pelicans, Shaw, because much has been said about the new look of Zion Williamson, right? And the fact that this is it, right? Like Joe Dumars is up in his ear and, Willie Green now, he's probably going to have a new version of Zion Williamson to work with at his disposal. And while they don't have, obviously, the crew of guys like McCollum and Ingram like they've had the last couple of years and stuff, this might actually allow Zion to flex out a little bit and, get his opportunity to shine even while having Trey Murphy and the boys alongside him. What do you think about the idea and the prospect of Zion now kind of doing this on his own? Or does it still need to come down to Willie Green making sure that the rest of those young guys that came up and helped stabilize this team as best possible last year have an opportunity to eat?
Yeah, New Orleans has a lot of questions for me. And I think they have potential to fight for a play-in. Like, I don't think they're going to be like a 15-win team. But all of that obviously depends on Zion's health, right? So if you get Zion to play 65 games or something like that in that lane, you get a healthy season from Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, that's like the starting point of their competency. Then you got to factor in if and when DeJounte Murray ultimately returns, right? And then, their rookie, when does he ultimately play? And Derek McQueen. You have Jordan Poole, where I'm not looking for a whole lot out of him right now, but he had a bounce back season from the awful season he had in Washington the year before. So there's bones of a team here that can maybe do a little something. And, a lot of it's going to depend on how well they play defense, which is the case for a lot of teams. But Zion is going to be such a linchpin to the overall success of this roster, almost playing like a Giannis type role. I think he's going to be basically like the point forward situation because they don't have a lot of play creation, especially with DeJounte Murray not on the roster currently, or we're dealing with the injury. So I'm not relying on Jordan Poole to, be my distributor of all things. And while Jeremiah Fears is a nice rookie and all, he's got to learn the game. So I think, play creation is where they're going to struggle a little bit. You also have to wonder if they have enough 3-point shooting. That center rotation is going to be interesting with Yves Messi and Kevon Looney and obviously McQueen as well. But ultimately, this Pelicans team is not defunct, but it's never been healthy. So that's why there's no confidence to say, okay, this is a team that's going to be any higher than we have them right now.
Yeah, the one thing I think that sticks out to me, Shaw, it's not the health of physical health. I don't use it in being slight and pundit, but it's the mental health of this team because they've been injured and because they've never been whole and because everything still feels like incomplete. And I think there's going to be another incomplete grade that takes place with this team. Because at the end of the day, Shaw, you've got some really talented players, right? You've got a talented Jordan Poole. You got a talented DeJounte Murray when he comes back and he's healthy. You've got a talented Zion Williamson, right? But there's only one or two players that I really believe are playing with a level of maturity. And if they're expected to win the amount of games that people think they're capable of is what their talent shows you, this is where it becomes a problem. So unless Willie Green wills these guys to a level to basically play above their heads, I don't know if whether or not we're going to really see a complete version of what this team can look like. And given how Joe Dumars has operated so far, I don't know if he's going to be patient enough to let it all kind of culminate and develop. I think everything is basically on its last straw. I think he's going to recognize and realize who his foundation players are going to be and the ones that he's going to find expendable. And I don't think he's going to waste any time if he knows that he can get value to move guys for the type of players that I think resonate with what he actually sees as the future for the New Orleans Pelicans. So it's a really interesting space, Shaw, because I could have been on board with the idea that the Pelicans could go out there and win you a bunch of games. But the immaturity, and what I'm saying is the not knowing how to win, not knowing how to lead the next guy, elevate the next guy. They unfortunately don't have that, and they won't have that at the beginning of the season because Dejounte Murray isn't going to be out there. But more importantly, I often say to myself, Dejounte Murray is a talented player, but by no stretch of the imagination, he's like a leader. I think that left him when he's given his opportunities to go out there and play and execute, and I think he's more of a free type player. His position affords him that, but I don't think that that's what's going to help the Pelicans, and they don't have that. They've got some veteran play, Looney, Alvarado, but I don't think all of that is going to culminate to the kind of competitiveness they're going to be dealing with on a night in, night out basis. And that to me is why I revisited this idea about saying, oh, it's realistic to see them more being lottery bound. But again, a lot of this still comes down to how much of Zion Williamson will you get during this course of the season, regardless of how much he's slimmed down. His ability to not be able to be available on the basketball court has been mired with injuries, not because of lack of weight. It's because he just can't stay healthy for his style of game, for his style of play.
Yeah. So again, I think just to reiterate the points, well, Alvarado is a nice, backup point guard and can give you some nice minutes. Again, he's not an elite play creator. So a lot of that's going to rely or come on the onus of Zion. And we know, like, it's just the injury stuff is a real situation. In addition to the 3-point shooting, where they were like 24th or 25th last year. So you take a team that's bottom third in play creation, bottom third in 3-point shooting, and you just wonder about how they're going to really manufacture offense. Again, a lot of that is due to all the injuries that they had last year, inclusive of the Dejounte Murray, because he went down like game 6 or something like that or whatever. He barely played last year. So there's some things here that they're going to ultimately need to try to figure out in terms of how they manufacture offense. But a lot of that is going to be on the shoulders of Zion specifically and what he's going to be able to do and kind of like set it in a Giannis type role for them. I'm interested to see when McQueen gets back. He has some play creation chops, Jordan Poole, Jordan Hawkins. I mean, you have a lot of guys who are going to be trying to get some shots up. Sadiq Bey is also on this roster. You just don't know if he's coming back from an injury himself, what he'll be able to contribute. So they're intriguing, but they're not trustworthy. And that's why I think I think the lottery seems safe, but they could surprise. And again, they have a lot of interesting guys, especially when you talk about Zion and his ability to stay healthy. If that happens, then yeah, they should be at least fighting for a play-in spot. But right now, I just don't have that confidence.
Yeah, just one thing I will note, Shaw, watch for Derek Queen. I'm really intrigued to see how he fares. We're not talking about him as being like, a rookie of the year candidate. I think by default, he can give himself an opportunity there because if their injury is sustained or if Willie Green likes him at the 5, he's definitely going to get opportunities for him to thrive and shine. So I would say if you're a Pelicans fan, pay attention. He looked really impressive in the NCAA tournament. I was a fan of him, even though, he didn't go far and we didn't get as much opportunity. I think we would have wanted to have seen him with what his skill set can bring to the table. But I think he could be a nice complementary piece. And I think that there's opportunity there for him to thrive, but it really just depends again on, where that ball lands and who has access to it and who's going to give him access to it. So it'll be interesting to see. Let's quickly shift, Shaw. I know that we often talk about the, the Utah Jazz and the Portland Trailblazers in the sense that they've been struggling teams, right? We saw, however, last year with the Portland Trailblazers, Chauncey Billups figured out something and worked with what he had and really maximized the potential of what this team looks like. To your point, man, it's either, feast or famine when it comes to this Western Conference. And I think you believe that the Portland Trailblazers are going to be on the bottom end of this feeding frenzy, which is going to be the play-in possible situation. So it's not as if to say, again, they're going to be a struggling basketball team that can only amass 13, 14 wins. However, it's just the nature of the beast because of the competitiveness in the Western Conference. But I was really curious from your perspective because, again, you're not going to have Damian Lillard for quite some time. Albeit, though, you still have Jrue Holiday and you still got the core guys. I know Scoot Henderson you know me, I'm not a complete believer of him. I just think if you have a healthy Drew Holiday, this team is going to always be competitive. I think the rest of the team is going to thrive with him being on that basketball court. But where is it that you see the Portland Trailblazers from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody loved the Portland story the second half of last year, especially post All Star, Danny Avdia as well too, kind of coming into his own and really was able to hoop. Drew Holiday, a veteran addition who seems to be buying into that, and we already said in our preseason, kind of our preseason conversations, that this team is determined to have a defensive identity in the Billups mold, from Thibault to Jeremy Grant, even Robert Williams, if he can obviously stay on the floor as well too. Clingan is supposed to be, one of the elite level rim protectors. I think I said Tumani Kamara as well too. Like, these are just guys who really are going to buy in and lock in defensively. And so for me, I just don't know if that's going to be enough to be able to get them to, a 42, above 500 record to be fighting for a play-in spot. And again, in a loaded Western Conference. So again, great story. Good players for the most part, maybe a little limited offensively. And I don't know where that's going to come, because like, who's the elite level guy here that you want taking shots? And this is Scoot Henderson is starting the season injured, right? So he should be back maybe November-ish, or, maybe early December. But there's just some things here too that give me a little bit of pause when it comes to their offensive identity. While I really do like what I know they're going to be able to do defensively, how many turnovers are they going to be able to create that leads to fast break points and scores? Like, I don't know. Can they lock people down? I just don't think they have enough scoring, especially with Drew Holiday, at this stage of his career. And there's going to be kind of a push and pull, I think, between what Shaedon Sharpe is and what he wants to be. I don't think that's been fully fleshed out. He's up for a rookie extension that they haven't offered and given as of yet. So I think this Blazers team has a lot to figure out offensively that gives me the security, if you will, to put them here in this lottery tier. Despite I like this roster.
Yeah, look, 36 wins, right? Which is, to me, pretty impressive given what Chauncey Billups has had to work with. I think what you're now seeing is this team is kind of rounding out to form of giving you something a little bit deeper than what they had the previous year. Now it's a matter of, where will these guys begin to thrive? It seems, to what your point was, Shaw, from a defensive perspective, there's an identity there. There's an emphasis of they're making sure that they're going to secure this part of it and then allow the offense to kind of take care of itself. And I think part of that, Shaw, is why it's so important to have a legitimate point guard to help these guys out. Because to your point, like we were just talking about the Pelicans, you really don't have anybody out there that's going to be able to go out and get their own buckets yet, right? Like, every single one of those guys, from Sharpe on down, you can't expect them to go out there and get their own, right? And so that's why having a Drew Holiday and that's why having a Dame Lillard, I think, is going to be so important at some point during the course of the year, or even just on the bench, to help Billups figure out a way to get these guys in a position to at least compete offensively on a night in, night out basis. So it'll be interesting to see where the Portland Trailblazers land. Real quick, Shaw, are you in the over-under part of them with the 36 wins? Do you see them, elevating up maybe another 2-3 wins, or do you kind of see them right where they are? You're pushing them right there.
Yeah, I can see a certain level of competency here, especially if Scoot gets back and is improved. So I can see maybe 2 or 3 more wins here, but I can't see them getting over 500 in the West right now.
You can't see 40, right? Like, yeah.
I mean, it's not impossible. It's just it doesn't seem likely, with the offensive deficiencies. If Denny Avdia is like your best offensive player, and right now we need to see if that's a real thing, right? What he showed at the end of last year was great, but is it sustainable? Is he really that good? And will the others, like a Jeremy Grant, be willing to accept that, that this guy's kind of come here and passed him in terms of the offensive pecking order? So with Dame out, like that role for the number one guy is very much up in the air. And while I think Shaedon Sharpe would love to be able to assume that mantle, there's just not enough consistency from him at all, even in terms of minutes, that make me feel like, okay, like Portland has this great offensive, scheme in place that's going to be able to get them to be, over a 500 team in the West.
Absolutely. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, discussing the lottery teams that we have selected, or lottery bound teams selected in our 2025-26 Western Conference preview. 2 more teams here to discuss, Shaw, real quickly. Sacramento Kings. Want to touch on them real quick. You know, Sacramento Kings to me is very interesting because when you look at the roster, right, it's like they have no business being like a play-in team. And for a moment, forget the record, right? If what you saw last year in the playoffs, the play-in situation with the Kings gave you a reason for you to feel like, well, damn, you know, they're just one player away. What do they go and do? They basically go and complete the set of, you know, taking the Chicago Bulls roster and basically putting them over into Sacramento. So just consider this a transfer, right? The Chicago Kings is now playing, right? And it's weird, Shaw, because I'm not trying to say that roster can't be a legitimately good roster, but there has not been anything documented to say it's been a successful roster. So where are we now landing on this idea that putting them now in the Western Conference, which is a much tougher conference for these guys to play, they're going to suddenly figure out a way for them to get good, get better because, you know, they're playing under Doug Christie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this is the me thing, right? Because you had them in the plan. My vote pushed them down into the lottery. So they're going to be right there on the cusp. But I think it's a great point that you started, because if DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine was getting you consistently into the play-in in the Eastern Conference, now you transfer that over to the West. And yes, you have a better version. You know, they're not the same type of player, but you have a better third option, if you will, in Sabonis than you did in Vucevic in Chicago. You can argue Sabonis is really the first option, or, you know, whatever, however you want to kind of put that pecking order in Sacramento. But it still makes me like, all right, well, how is that any better? Dennis Schroeder is going to be the lead guard here. And while there's competency there as well, too, and Malik Monk, you know, still fighting for Sixth Man of the Year, or maybe I don't think he can start on this roster, but maybe. It just doesn't seem
like they're always pushing him down. You know, so funny, Shaw. Maybe Mike Brown was the only person that really believed that he really wanted Malik Monk to be a starter. But every single year since that explosion, they have found a way to suppress Malik Monk from being a starter. It's like almost they're stamping it on your forehead. You, my friend.
He forced into those minutes last year with some injuries. And so, you know, he got a taste back of kind of like what he feels like should be his permanent gig. But to me, while DeRozan and LaVine will be competent, and LaVine even had a bounce back season, I think we talked about that, right? He was efficient for the most part, but it just is not equating to winning basketball. And I think that's going to be even harder to translate in a very, very deep and tough Western Conference on a team that, again, they're a little like Toronto to me, where you like some of their players, but you don't like them together. And I just don't know if this is us all fits, even with Sabonis, and Sabonis's contract is coming up, and whether or not he's going to want to be a King long term. Like, I think that the Kings are facing a lot more questions than they have answers for right now.
I feel bad, and I'm going to say this real quick, Shaw. I really feel bad for Keegan Murray. I feel bad for Keon Ellis. Okay, I thought that with what took place, this was an opportunity for you to really allow your young guys to thrive and shine, right? Like, now, because they made this move of getting Zach LaVine, now because of this move of having DeMar DeRozan, you have basically said that it's a veteran forward type of team. And while Domantas Sabonis is a young veteran, a lot of what you're never going to be able to fully see come to fruition is those guys that you basically put on your roster, right? Like, they haven't had time to add that depth for you. And while there was an opportunity for you maybe to see what Devin Carter could give you, what Ellis could give you, you then put Dennis Schroeder there. And to me, you only do that because you've got Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. You know what I'm saying? And so, to your point, that's the thing that's just kind of disheartening. Like, it's basically adding chaos to the chaotic, and it just doesn't make any sense. So I'm hoping that through all of this, that Sabonis can obviously still be a solid player, right? I don't know where that combination of him and those three are going to come into play. I feel like so far apart rather than closer together. But the one person I really want to thrive from this, which I'm struggling to see, is going to be Keegan Murray. I mean, we talked so highly of him when he came out in his rookie season, and there were so many chances, opportunities. I just felt like either they just didn't see the confidence, or maybe he just didn't see the confidence. But now we're probably never going to see that happen, given the way that this roster is constructed, because they would have needed him a whole lot more than I think them worrying about having Zach LaVine on this roster. You know what I mean? Like that to me is where I kind of fell on the scale with the Kings, because I'm thinking about the future for them. And I would rather be paying more money for someone that I know has a lot more upside and can give me a lot more than worrying about these veteran guys trying to rekindle the Chicago magic that they had.
Yeah, I agree. And Keegan Murray is somebody I think we can add to a list of, it's the kind of the wire phrase, right? Do it or don't. And we can create a list of some of those guys around the NBA. But some of that they don't, because of maybe the situation and or the additional talent that is brought in by the management. So like you said, I think Murray's role, while he hasn't grabbed the bull by the horns, so to speak, now it's even going to be harder to do because you have veteran guys who are going to be taking more shots and opportunities away from him on this team and roster in general. And I misspoke earlier, Sabonis, he recently re-signed a contract. His contract isn't up, but I think trade rumors are starting to swirl him in general. So that's something that I think the Kings need to figure out if they want to, push forward and pay him the $130 million or whatever it is he's owed for the next 3 years, or would they like to cash in and see if they can get some assets for him right now while, his value is at least at a middle tier.
Absolutely. All right, quick call outs. Phoenix Suns, Utah Jazz. We had them in that mix as well too. Shaw, thoughts about the Phoenix Suns? Listen, I probably felt like I would have wanted them to be in there, but I feel like this probably is the best situation for Devin Booker, because I want to see the old Devin Booker. I want to see Devin Booker cook. Even if he's playing next to Jalen Green, that's fine. There'd be plenty of shots to go around for Jalen Green to resurrect or, resuscitate, his young career. But I want to see Devin Booker cook, and I think this is a good situation for him in Phoenix. I don't know if it'll translate to a mass amount of wins, but I want to see that version of him out there on the basketball court against the better teams, and him thriving rather than struggling to find his identity when he was playing with all of these other stars on his roster.
I will say this. I'm growing a little bit more optimistic about Phoenix. I think everybody else listens to is like, this is a bad team. This is a terrible team that's going to be in the lottery. I think their record will reflect that, but I don't think their play on the court will. It's going to be, to me, I think it's going to be a situation where they'll probably have some, bad turnovers, lose games late in the fourth quarter, but be competitive, have a point differential of maybe 5 or 6 a game or whatever, but all still end up having a pretty bad record, but they'll be mostly competitive. I think they're going to be maybe a little bit more like Portland, not in terms of the win total, but in terms of the spirit. But I still think they're going to be in the lottery nonetheless. And while Booker's going back into that point guard type of role for this team, and Jalen Green, we haven't seen very sparingly so far in the preseason. I just don't know what that pairing is going to look like long term. And that center rotation is something that's very interesting for me to watch. So I think again, Phoenix is going to be slightly more competitive than maybe some people are giving credit for, but not a team that's going to be threatening to do anything serious in the Western Conference.
Absolutely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, our 25-26 Western Conference preview. Coming up, we're going to knock out the play-in teams and the teams that are middle of the pack. Trust me when I tell you, it is much closer than the titles reflect. You don't want to miss it here on The Baseline.
You've earned this. Now it's time to embark on your own personal adventure. Book your vacation with Exquisite Travel and Tours today. Explore the world and discover yourself.
We are back. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast, our 2025-26 Western Conference preview. Time for us to dig into our play-in teams. And that's going to be the LA Lakers, the Dallas Mavericks, and the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, I said that leading into this, that it may seem a little bit closer than most people may realize. What I'm saying is that we'll be talking about the teams that we believe are going to be middle of the pack. But by no stretch of the imagination are we saying that the gap between teams that are considered play-in and teams that are considered middle of the pack, and maybe even some of the teams that we were just talking about as lottery, that there is going to be such a wide margin. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how closely contested this conference rides. So, Shaw, let's dig in. I want to talk about the Memphis Grizzlies because, listen, we always talk about the Los Angeles Lakers, and I think it's safe to say we know what's riding on the success of the LA Lakers, right? And obviously, the loss of LeBron for the first couple of weeks, I think it's more of an impact to the Lakers' opportunities to hang with the better teams in the Western Conference than worrying about whether or not they become play-in bound. But I think when we talk about teams that are play-in worthy, and we've been on them for such a long time. The Memphis Grizzlies is this confusing conundrum of a team where they've had talent pass through over the last few years and for some reason have not lived up to the potential of what the team collectively have displayed for us through certain spurts throughout the year over the last few years. And, we've talked about it. You've talked about it. It comes right back. And I'm sure he would want it that way. But I'm even saying, is it too much of a shoulder to bear? It comes right back to Ja Morant. Like this, he represents the exact definition of where I go, we go, right? Like that's how the Memphis Grizzlies have set this thing up. Where I go, we go when it comes to Ja Morant. And so before we would have said with the most confidence they're middle of the pack, maybe in a contender. Now we've got them basically as low as playing. Obviously losing Desmond Bane is big, but is it really that big, Shaw, that we have actually demoted this team down to the point where they're going to be play-in worthy given the way that this roster is constructed?
Yeah, well, as you alluded to, it starts with Ja Morant, but also now with, competency and consistency within the coaching. There was a disjointment between, the management, the coaching, and the players' locker room. And so now, if they're going to run a consistent offense that better features Ja than it did at the beginning part of last year, then great. But Ja is also starting the season again injured again. Now he's week to week. Zach Edey is also week to week after having ankle surgery in the summer. Jaren Jackson Jr. is also starting the season on the shelf. So we're a week or so away from the beginning of this, and 3 of their projected 5 starters are questionable at best. For the start of the season, and then probably maybe even until maybe the first 10 or 15 games. And in the West, that can put you, 2 rungs below where you think you ultimately should be, even if you have that talent. And that's where it gives me a lot of pause when it comes to what Memphis is going to ultimately be able to do. Ty Jerome, sure, nice addition and pickup here. We expect Jalen Wells in essence to be able to take a second step back up. Vince Williams Jr., Greg Jackson the second, these are all competent players. Santi Aldama even is going to obviously have to play some starters minutes here with some of the guys being injured. But I'm concerned. I'm just concerned about their overall health and their ability to really stay competitive and more so consistent, within the Western Conference. Again, they're not defunct of talent. Your guy KCP as well too on this team. Is he going to have some semblance of return to form? I think we like Scottie Pippen Jr. You list a bunch of guys. Brandon Clark is also injured. There's just so many things already starting from Memphis again that kind of gives me this is just like the last 2 years where it's just not going to turn out for them. So play-in seems again for me safe, but they have the talent of a team that should definitely be in the middle of the pack if they can stay healthy. But we're just not starting off the season off on the right foot. So I'm just not going to hitch my wagon to them to be a middle of the pack team.
It's funny, Shaw. We could easily be talking about them as a lottery team. That's how much it's teetering because of the fragility of health for their main players, for their starting roster. And I think what this comes down to for me more than anything is we're going to really see if whether or not their head coach, Lasalo, can do what Taylor Jenkins has managed to do for this team for the last few years. I mean, if you really think about it, Taylor Jenkins should honestly have his own TV show right now next to NBC's America's Got Talent. It should be Memphis Got Talent. He is given a lot of players that nobody is even paying attention to. He is giving them opportunities to thrive and shine, right? Given the way that the roster has been always mired with injuries from their star players. Everyone has had an opportunity to step up, and everyone has had an opportunity to fill up stat sheets, and everyone has had an opportunity to contribute to this team collectively succeeding and exceeding certain levels of expectations. And then when the stars come in, everyone is like, what you going to do? Right? Seriously, and now we're seeing that because you have a different head coach, which means there's going to be a different philosophy, which means there's going to be different expectations about how these guys are going to come in and contribute. We're going to see if whether or not this works. And that to me is the part that scares me more than anything. I don't know if they're going to be able, to strike the iron while it's hot twice the same way, because it's not that I don't have confidence in them. It's just that I just don't know if it resonates the same way, and the logic of how you apply and utilize your roster, the depth of your roster, is going to hit the same way now that we're into this upcoming season, and we've kind of gotten an idea of what it is that Taylor Jenkins did do in order to get these role players to thrive.
Yeah, Memphis started the season off really well last year, then really just kind of hit the skids. They were 48 and 34. So, again, 2 wins from 50. And then I'll throw some things at you real quick. They were 6th in offense, 10th in defensive rating, and then 6th, in net rating. So top 10, if you will, in 3 very telling categories for what should be a competitive team. And that landed them 8th in the Western Conference. And I don't know if you said that about any other team with that type of pedigree in terms of the statistical output, where you'd feel like, okay, those stats are completely disjointed from what you saw on the on-court product. Even with the 48 wins, right? Like, they didn't feel like this, especially towards the latter part of the season. They didn't feel like this juggernaut team that was, oh, look where they were, top 10 in those 3 categories. So what do they do now that's different, especially when they're starting the season in arrears with 3 starters on the bench? I don't know, bro. I think what you said makes a lot more sense even now as we're talking it out. Like, this could be more of a lottery or, more of a lottery team than a play-in team right now. But there's a lot of hope and dreams pinned on the focus of Ja Morant. And if he can come back and start to regain some of the glamour and glitz that everybody was heaping upon him in terms of the praise that, hey, he's could be one of the next best American players, then you're cooking with gas. But what evidence do we have that that's going to be the case right now?
And most importantly, Shaw, listen, I've been hard on Jaren Jackson Jr., right? And I've said that while Ja Morant goes out on the mend, this is Jaren Jackson Jr.'s team. And yet we still keep coming back to that same question over and over and over again. Does he feel like that's part of his team? I think where there was opportunities for him to maybe find someplace else. And I'm not saying he can't get along with and can't ride with Ja Morant. I'm just saying that I just think that we may have seen the best of what those two can do together if we're talking about the Memphis Grizzlies, competing and playing with the likes of the Thunder, the likes of the Rockets, the Timberwolves, and stuff like that. Like, there comes a point where that combination kind of wanes in itself. We had the same conversation. We're going to have the same conversation with Cat and Anthony Edwards. So I think it will be, why would it be so far apart to think the same thing for Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr.? I just think that the way Jaren Jackson Jr. plays, how his game is suited, and the way he contributes, say, to this basketball team, unless Lasalo figures out a way to get him to thrive, to step up to another level on those moments when Morant goes down to injury, this is a chance for Jaren Jackson Jr. to play at an MVP level. He doesn't do it. He plays good. He plays marginally better. But then the moment Morant comes back, Jaren Jackson Jr. hides. Like, I don't say shrivels, but his numbers and his impact don't seem to have the same oomph like when Morant is off the floor. And I just think at some point you got to start questioning it. So with that being said, let's transition to the Dallas Mavericks, right? Cooper Flag is drafted. Strike gold, right? You got Cooper Flag, you've got Kyrie, you've got Anthony Davis. Why are we speaking less confidently about this team being a contender, or maybe more solidly as a middle of the pack team? Why do we see them still more as a play-in? And I'll let you kind of lay it out there for us, sir.
Sure. I mean, I think first and foremost is that Kyrie's not back. He won't start the season, and maybe January, maybe February. Like, we don't know. And then there's still disjointment between Jason Kidd and Nico Harrison and what they're saying. Kyrie's ahead of schedule, and Jason Kidd is like, no, he's not. So even that, like, there's just weirdness, still weirdness going on in Dallas. I don't love it. Anthony Davis comes in. He looks a little heavy. Now he's got to wear, basically, eye protection for the rest of his career because he's had detached retinas, which is obviously a very, very scary situation. So I think they'll still have a very good defensive identity, and Jason Kidd has become a really good basketball coach over the course of his career. And there's a certain level of competency that they'll be able to have on that side of the floor, in addition with the promise of Cooper Flag. But I think, 14, 5-5, 5-4, something like that, I think are realistic expectations for Cooper Flag. But there are going to be some nights where it's going to be ugly, in him getting that. I am a little worried now with Luka gone because PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford and guys like that were quintessential guys that played great in a Luka system. Kyrie, when he returns, is not Luka in terms of that level of play creation. So they don't currently have that on the roster. even if you think Cooper Flag is going to be, again, kind of like a point forward type of situation. I think those guys now become a little miscasted in some of their roles, and I don't know if that's going to lead to unhappiness, especially with AD now coming in to presumably man a lot of those front court minutes. So there could be some stuff there that, you know, makes for some locker room discomfort, especially in the case of PJ Washington, who's been coming off the bench since in the preseason. You know, Derek Lively also is a guy who needs to stay healthy. All that for me to say that, you know, I think there's some decent bones here, but not enough that makes me say this is the middle of the pack team. But I think with Kyrie expected to come back in the middle part of the season, and if he can be, you know, even 80% of what he usually is, that can make this team, you know, dangerous in the latter part of the year, and also makes them a good candidate for the play-in situation here in the West.
I'm speaking like as if I'm like a fantasy basketball, you know, commentator here. That the Mavericks getting Cooper Flag, I think, will pay dividends, not this year but next year. Because if you really think about it, if the Dallas Mavericks had won the championship, right, a couple of years ago, they would have said, man, we wouldn't have gotten here without PJ Washington. And if you really think about it, this is an opportunity for PJ Washington to kind of solidify himself as that 3-4 kind of player. But because he's so inconsistent offensively, and he has too many moments where he just doesn't appear, like he disappears, it made things easier for Nico Harrison to say, we're in this position. We got to find the best player possible. And clearly the best player right now is going to be Cooper Flag, because there's so much opportunity and upside with him. He can afford to be inconsistent, and even his inconsistency will be more consistent than PJ Washington. And that's not necessarily a diss. Like, PJ Washington gives you depth, but it may be so that you're not trying to force him to be a starter, because maybe he's not really a starter when you're playing next to guys like this way that this roster is constructed. I think it eases things up for him. And I think Cooper Flag wants this, because I think he sees that window of whatever's going to happen to Kyrie and whatever happens to Anthony Davis, they're going to still need what I can bring to the table. And so this is a good situation for Cooper Flag. If he exceeds and excels, the Dallas Mavericks will very much be in the play-in, but can elevate possibly to a middle of the pack team. Because I think the reliance on whether or not things are going to happen if you get Kyrie at 100% and, you know, Anthony Davis, a lot of it still comes down to Cooper Flag and where he's set up and positioned in the role that he can play both sides of the basketball can be very helpful for a very young, lively team that Jason Kidd loves to coach up. He's got a lot of younger guys that can come out there and can help stay competitive. He can change the flow. He can slow things down. He can speed things up. And at the end of the day, if his guys can come back healthy, that means that they're more veteran guys with the ability to help them score and be better because of it. So I like where they are.
I'd say in a little bit of a way, we've buried the lead. And obviously, we got to get through a whole lot of teams. But I'll say this: you know, our predictions are going to come out. But Anthony Davis as a fifth spot MVP vote getter this year. That's what I'm saying. Not the MVP of the league, but somebody like, oh, you know what? He had a really good year, and I give him like my, you know, a fifth place vote. I think that's something that Dallas is hoping and relying on, and that could really turn the tide for them. You know, while Cooper Flag was great and all, and they need him to be successful, it doesn't mean anything if Anthony Davis is not playing like truly like an MVP, especially in the wake of the Luka trade. And that's where this is all really going to hinge upon his ability to be healthy. And yes, it's nice to have PJ Washington and Najee Marshall and guys like that who can come and spell some of those minutes. But AD needs to be a guy who's elite on both sides of the basketball for the Dallas Mavericks to be in this tier and slightly above.
Absolutely. All right. So now let's talk about those middle of the pack teams, right? Now we have the Los Angeles Clippers, we have the Golden State Warriors, and San Antonio Spurs. And I know that we were teetering, like, you know, we said Lakers, are they playing or middle of the pack? Like I said, this is the reason why it's as close as it is. We could have flip-flopped any of these LA teams and basically put them, you know, in that other tier if we wanted to. So with the LA Clippers, Shaw, even with the roster moves that they've made, it surprises me because I think most people think this team can actually be contenders. I'm not buying that. You know, I'm not buying it. I just think that it's more of, you know, working that Tyron magic, that Lou magic, to make it all work and come together. Just, you believe in him that much more that he's going to figure out a way to put this ensemble cast of guys together to go out there and literally do the impossible.
Yeah, it's like you said, though, like when we're doing these rankings or, predictions, there's a calculus that has to be involved. So you take a little bit of previous history, a lot of with the Clippers and a lot of the teams we've discussed in the West is the injury factor. Like, all right, how many games are they actually going to play together? Then you want to give some credit to the greatness of Ty Lue as a coach. Then you add the veteran aspect of Chris Paul and Bradley Beal and the contracts they're on. And then you kind of come up with a thing. It's like, all right, well, what feels safe? What feels right? As opposed to, so you don't want to go too hard in terms of like, all right, well, let's put them here. They're elite level contenders. It feels like middle of the pack seems like the most likely scenario for them. And then a very dangerous team if they're healthy when it comes to the playoffs. Vision of Brook Lopez and John Collins, like there's a lot of competency on this team, a lot of competency. And Zubac, after the great season that he had last year, so just kind of even feeling more comfortable and confident in his role, the Clippers have the variety to play multiple ways, and that put a lot of big lineups out on the floor as well too. Maybe a slight question with the shooting, but again, you hopefully Bradley Beal solves a lot of that as well too. You get the mid-range assassin and Chris Paul while he's not scoring 20 points a game, but can still be very competent in the teens, whether that's starting or coming off the bench. And there's a lot to be excited about in spite of the Kawhi and Aspire situation that's circulating their orbit in general. The team on the basketball floor should be pretty good as long as they can stay healthy. Chris Dunn as well too in an ancillary role. Like, there's not a whole lot of holes when it comes to this Clippers lineup right now.
I mean, you think they're too deep of a team, Joe? I mean, they're arguably like a team that's so deep that it's like, are we going to see a lot of these guys playing a certain number of minutes, or we're assuming that this is a great cover because they can't rely on their core players to stay healthy enough to be on the basketball court? So they're going to have to contribute.
I think it's that, right? And then it's just the notion of like, you don't even want Kawhi to qualify for the 65 games for like awards. Like, you want to basically bubble wrap him. If you get him to play 50 to 55 games at a certain level, I'm sure Tyler would obviously want him out there every night, but I don't think we're ever going to see Kawhi ever do that. So this allows them to have a certain level of, like you said, depth to be able to account for some of that as well too. Brook Lopez and John Collins and Derek Jones, like I said, these are all just decent guys who don't hurt you when they're on the basketball floor. And then it can allow you, if Harden can presumably still play his 65 to 70 something games, that is a lot of greatness that I think this Clippers team can ultimately realize in a way that is going to make some Western Conference teams uncomfortable. Again, I think what I'm a little worried about is, will their defense stay at the same level that it was last year? I'm not as convinced about that. But if they slip from they were third or fifth or something like that, if they slip to like 9th or 10th, I mean, that's still very, very good. And I think if Kawhi is healthy for the majority part of the year, the sky is really the limit for LA. It's just a matter of, can they stay healthy when it really matters the most?
All right, let's transition to the Golden State Warriors, right? Another team, another LA team, right? That you say to yourself, all right.
Not LA team.
We just say again.
You said LA team?
Yeah, well, Golden State.
It's
not LA, but California. Sorry, California-based team. Sorry. Another Cali team. My apologies. I said LA team.
San Francisco,
twice.
Bro. Yeah.
They've been taking over, the last decade or so. It's kind of, whatever. Anyway, so for a California-based team, right, Golden State Warriors, and we were just talking about the depth of the Clippers, we could basically be saying the same thing about this Warriors team. The only difference is that the depth is a lot of unknown names that are, in the Kerr world, they resonate and they have some kind of placement. They just don't have shine. Now there's an opportunity here, quote unquote, to shine, right? Because they lost a couple of their old veteran players, a couple of pieces and things of that nature. But are we speaking with the same confidence that what Tyronn Lue is going to have to do with his LA Clippers, Steve Kerr is going to be able to do with this version of the Golden State Warriors?
Yeah, it's a nice, in theory, team, and you think the pieces should fit, right? With Al Horford being added to this, they bring back the Anthony Melton as well too, to kind of give them some depth. They resign, Gary Payton Jr. And obviously what you have in Curry, Draymond Green, and now Jimmy Butler. The outlier here is still the Kuminga situation, and I think it's not so much about what I'm worried about in terms of talent on the Warriors roster, as it is chemistry in that locker room with whatever Kuminga's role ultimately ends up being. He signs a qualifying offer, takes, I think, a year less than he would have ultimately liked. But now is Kerr going to play him? And does it become a distraction for somebody who is, okay, but hasn't really shown much, I think, at this stage of his career and hasn't had the opportunity? There's also something that I think we should pay attention to with Buddy Hield. He's important to spacing the floor, especially when Curry's out. But he has some serious lapses and some serious droughts. And I think there's some level of frustration that a guy like Jimmy Butler and Draymond could ultimately show here too. So to me, this is
did that in the preseason.
Yeah,
everyone thinks it's a joke, but there's nothing funny about that.
And I'm not
never
trying to blow it out of
like
proportion per se, but I think this has a little bit of a powder keg situation for me here. Right. So based off talent alone, I want to put Golden State in the tier that we have them right now. Right. I believe in the Curry magic and all the things, and he's healthy. Hey, he can, drag a team to 40 wins. But I think there's some stuff here to kind of watch when it comes to that locker room situation and whether or not it goes in the way that it needs to. But Al Horford is a great connector of people. So I think even from that lens, it's not just what he'll be able to do on the court, but what he'll be able to do to try to hopefully kind of appease any tension that might be in the locker room. So, I think, again, I'm not trying to hedge my bets here, but there's things I want to watch here in Golden State, even outside of what they do on the basketball floor.
I want to know whose voice is really going to resonate in that locker room when things don't go right for the Warriors. We've seen way too many instances with this Warriors team where they look like even last year, they look like a team that can hang with, the likes of the Thunder and the Denver Nuggets. And then they go through some of these rough patches, and their losses are it's what triggered the whole idea of getting a Jimmy Butler. I think there's a level of impatience, not with Draymond Green on this team. I think it's a level of impatience of Draymond Green's only voice being in that locker room, or Draymond Green's presence and his mannerisms, the only thing that you hang your hat on in order to get this team to step up and play. I think now that you have that with Jimmy Butler, that's something that can help augment and offset that. I think now that you have that with Al Horford, I think that's something you can augment and offset that with. But I think what this has come down to is, can they hang with the better teams, man? Can they play their best when it matters the most, when it needs to happen? And to your point, they've got way too many imbalanced players that can shift that narrative very quickly and then trigger these upstart moments that you see from Butler and trigger these upstart moments that you see from Draymond Green. You'll never see that from Horford, and you'll never see that from Steph Curry. But when Podziemski is not hitting, when Hield ain't hitting, when Quentin Post disappears, like when all of these guys that they're giving these opportunities to, even Gary Payton II, who, he's ingratiated himself into the Bay Area community. Everyone loves him, but they are quick to call him when he doesn't do what he does. When these guys fall off and don't really help the veteran guys, it just seems to create more of that chatter, more of that level of distraction. And I just think it'll be interesting to see how extreme it gets when it comes to the Golden State Warriors and how they handle it, because they're going to get pushed to adversity because of the way that these other teams are currently playing ahead of them, right? And even below them. I think they're not going to completely separate themselves from all of these other teams like we used to do in the past, and we used to acknowledge in the past when it was Curry, Thompson, and Draymond Green. I think even with Butler, they're still clumped in together. And I think that reality is what's starting to kick in for them, knowing that that's what's going to happen on a night in, night out basis.
Yeah, this is a pesky team, but not a championship level team. And, if they do something else, make a trade for the team that we kind of glazed over in Utah, they finally make a Lauri Markkanen trade or something like that, then awesome.
Even a Lauri Markkanen move, Shaw, I don't know about whether or not that's going to move the needle. I mean, it can help. I just don't know if it's going to move the needle.
Well, maybe you're not a marketing guy, but I think just in terms of who's a player that helps Golden State in general. Also here, breaking news as we're recording, so by the time this comes out, we'll be breaking. But for us, Keegan Murray has suffered a 4 to 6 week injury with a torn UCL in the thumb. I think that's the same injury Jared McCain had for the Philadelphia 76ers. Oh. So now Keegan Murray will be out on the shelf. So solidifies my pick to have them in the lottery as opposed to the play-in to start this year.
Check that box now.
Sorry for Keegan Murray. Again, he's a guy that we all think and are hoping a lot of great things for. Tough way for him to start the season.
Absolutely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA 25-26 Western Conference preview. Let's talk about that other team that's in the middle of the pack, Shaw. This is actually the team that we have elevated quite nicely into this conversation. And I think we can speak with confidence about it, the San Antonio Spurs. And like, look, you look at this roster, man, what's there not to like about it? There is just nothing but upside and potential. And they've proven that I think that they can go out there and compete with the better teams up and down this Western Conference. It would be hard pressed for us not to imagine this team not putting themselves in this conversation. Listen, any team can be had at any given night, but I think when you have Johnson, who obviously the locker room bought into him, they feel that the culture is still intact, even with Popovich moving on. You've seen what you're getting from Wemby, from Castle, from all of these guys. It's really hard not to sit here and say, we believe that this team is definitely going to make some noise, and this is the year for them to do it.
And it all hinges on Wemby and, him staying fully healthy to play, 65, 70 games throughout the course of the year. De'Aaron Fox, he's starting the season on the shelf, so that's not great. But I think that combination is going to be pretty impactful. And they have a lot of great, I keep utilizing the word competency, but they filled out the rest of this roster with guys like Luke Cornett and even Kelly Olynyk. Just guys who just know how to play and are not going to hurt you when they get on the floor. Then
and versatile guys. Shaw, just real quick, I want to tell you, versatile guys, like guys that can play multiple positions defensively and complement the kind of style of play that Wemby plays offensively as well too. So which is I think is really critical for how Johnson is going to be able to mix and match and make those adjustments. Sometimes it's hard when you don't have the roster to do that with, but I think that's going to make things a little bit easier for the Spurs as well too.
Right. And then, rookie, you hope rookie sensation Dylan Harper, what role can he play? Presumably coming off the proverbial bench. Another year of Stephon Castle too, who looked really good toward the latter part of last year. Even when Victor went down, he really started to step into his own, had put up some really good games. And a guy like Harrison Barnes, who knows what his role is. Like, he's not trying to take away from you. Hey, you give me the ball, you give me a grenade, I don't mind. I'll do what I need to do with it, but I'm not trying to take shots away from some of these lead guys. Just again, a lot of good basketball players. I think Mitch Johnson had a really good rookie year, despite being thrust in a role that he wasn't necessarily prepared for. That was what's going to be his role going in. Now fully opportunity to invest it in his system, and the Spurs still have opportunities to make trades if they want to. So whether that's getting off a Devin Vassell, which they're pretty high on, I don't think they'll do that. But Keldon Johnson's been rumored about many times. Jeremy Sohan is in the same situation. Rookie scale contract is due for an extension. They haven't really done that. They can maybe move some of those guys if they find them to be unhappy. But I think the Spurs team, while we might be a year early, right? Like I've said that, and I said that even on our prediction show. Like, I might be a little early on Wemby. I think he could be have like the defensive player of the year, MVP types conversation. I don't know, maybe even MIP or some combination of two of those three, and then elevate the Spurs team into where we think is the middle of the pack, where they are like firmly planted into a playoff spot. Again, it seems a little early. Playing seems more appropriate. But I think we both just really recognize the greatness of Victor Wembanyama and the rest of this roster, how it complements him currently.
Absolutely. Look, it's his world, man. It's just a question of how confident we want to elevate this team. I think this is right. I think it's right to elevate them as a middle of the pack team. I expect them to be a team that amasses enough wins where they are comfortably in the playoff picture, and then we'll see what it looks like from there. And listen, we were talking about these other teams a moment ago, Shaw, minus the situation that happened to Wemby, which was a very unique circumstance with the blood clots. It wasn't because of, strain, MCL, ACL, any tear, meniscus, that. Barring that not happening, and you didn't hear of any of that with all of their other young talent, these guys together as a team, as a unit, were making an impact, and they were right there. I think this to me, I would be more confident in seeing them elevating themselves one step further, to your point, as long as Wemby stays healthy. And I can't see where that doesn't happen to be the case. I'm on board with you as well, too, about, I don't know if I'm going to put him in that conversation yet for MVP. I think a happenstance, he'll have MVP like kind of numbers, but the defensive player of the year, to me, I think that is important. I think he anchors that team defensively. I think, hey, this San Antonio Spurs team is going to be so dangerous for people to pay attention to. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we'll get down to the contenders. We got 4 teams in that lock. You don't want to miss out where we have them situated and what our predictions are regarding what kind of outcome they're going to give us for the remainder for the regular season. So tune in here on The Baseline. We're back. Cal Lee Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. Time for us to dig into the teams that we have selected as our contenders for the Western Conference. And that leaves the remaining 4 teams, right? Like the Oklahoma City Thunder. Everybody knows that. Houston Rockets, Minnesota Timberwolves, Denver Nuggets. So let's start with the teams that we believe Shaw will push the overall team, which I think we're safe to say we're going to believe in the Oklahoma City Thunder being that top seeded team once again. I don't know if I'm going to completely buy into the idea that the Thunder are going to amass the same number of wins that they gave us last year. They had 68, I don't want to say they're taking a step back, but I do think that as a team, they may prioritize winning a little bit less to make sure that they stay as top seeded, but they're going to be one of the better teams. That being said, do we give rise and give credence to the rise of a team like the Houston Rockets, to a team like maybe possibly the Minnesota Timberwolves, or a team like the Denver Nuggets, where this is the reset button for the Nuggets and they will resupplant themselves again as being the talk of the town in the Western Conference because of that?
Yeah, so there's a lot to get into, like trying to touch on all 4 teams really quickly. I think there's a natural feel like, hey, there's a championship malaise. This team will still be good, but OKC, like, what do they really need to come out and improve in the regular season? And then, they'll be a 1 or 2 seed, and then, presumably you potentially be the repeat champions, right? Like that, we kind of take that for granted. But I will say, Chet Holmgren is healthy for the entirety of the season, right? That can be a significant change in terms of their overall trajectory, in terms of even trying to match last season's win total, because they did all that with him missing like the first 40 games of the year or whatever, like the middle 40 of the games, right? So those are things too that I think we can take into consideration. Houston, I think everybody feel a lot more confident had Fred VanVleet not gone down, but we still feel like there's enough here for them to remain as a contender in the Western Conference, not only because of the addition of Kevin Durant, but what we now will presume will be the additional workload of Amen Thompson, whether he now becomes a starting point guard and has to distribute, just giving him more reps and more opportunities to create. I think Houston is very comfortable with that, in addition to Şengün continuing to progress into this mode. So Houston seems to be right there with all the other depth moves that they made as well, too, getting Clint Capella and re-signing Steven Adams and, presumably now the role for Reed Shepherd here now, too. Where we deferred on this was between the Nuggets and the Wolves, right? I had the Nuggets as a contender. You had them as in the middle of the pack, and vice versa for me on when it comes to Minnesota. These are 2 teams where now I'm interested to your thought process on Minnesota, because I presume a lot of it is just another year of Anthony Edwards and learning and hanging to take a step up and potentially getting into MVP type category. Whereas I look at Denver and we know Jokic is truly still the best player in basketball, but the depth that they made in essence to try to now surround him with Valanciunas and Cam Johnson and things like that, like this team, and bringing back Bruce Brown, they made moves where I don't think Minnesota really did anything other than lose Nickeil Alexander-Walker and re-sign Naz Reid. Like, I just don't see how you have Minnesota elevating above Denver into that contender tier. So let's kind of pause and go to the conversation there. Why Minnesota as a contender as opposed to the middle of the pack?
I feel like the Minnesota Timberwolves still have an ace up in their sleeve because Anthony Edwards still has not come into his own as far as his level of dominance. And I think against the Denver Nuggets, he is their kryptonite. I'm just looking at it from a matchup perspective, Shaw, that if you actually had me see the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves play up against each other, that I'm going to wind up picking the Minnesota Timberwolves because I feel the Timberwolves have enough to disrupt the Denver Nuggets and disrupt the Nuggets' ability to be as dominant as I think that they have been over the last couple of years. I'm not taking anything away from Jamal Murray, but you definitely aren't going to see Jamal Murray taking Anthony Edwards. You're definitely not going to see Christian Brown taking on Anthony Edwards. I think if Anthony Edwards, again, takes another step up, he to me is the X factor when it comes to what he can do on a night in, night out basis at his level and his position. That being said, when you look at the team collectively, I think, again, another full year of this team together, the Minnesota Timberwolves can take another step like they did when the final year of Karl Anthony Towns. It took them a couple of years before they got it right. And I think that's where the shock value came in when they moved Karl Anthony Towns, right? Obviously, that was more business reasons, but I think everybody safely said, this is Anthony Edwards' team. So even if they've gotten Julius Randle and they got DiVincenzo and they got all of these guys, this is still Anthony Edwards' team. And at the end of the day, Anthony Edwards has another level that he can go to. With that being said, the Denver Nuggets are going to ask of Jokic to replicate and find another level to go through. And I'm just saying, it's kind of like when you're watching one of those movies, man, where you know who that guy is, right? So all that you do, you just keep throwing bodies and throwing bodies and throwing more bodies and more bodies. Minnesota Timberwolves going to throw their whole roster at Jokic. He, at the end of the day, is going to have to rely on some of them other guys to go out there and execute. And we've seen where they have not done it consistently. And I just feel
you're lying, but you're saying relying on Minnesota's continuity, another year of Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards playing together, and Anthony Edwards taking the proverbial leap. I think what needs to be conversated about too is there's also a decline coming from Mike Conley, a continual decline at that point guard situation.
Yes, I agree.
So now does that presumably get taken up by Rob Dillingham? You know, they haven't trusted him really as of yet. I don't think Bones Howland, while they added him, I don't think he's making a significant difference to this. So does Dillingham now come in here and help with the play creation, or does all that fall on Anthony Edwards?
Well, I shift.
That's where I'm a little bit more dubious.
I got you, but I shift my focus on McDaniels. I think Jaden McDaniels, now that Alexander Walker is gone, I think Jaden McDaniels has an opportunity to help step up. And I'm not saying as a guard from a guard perspective, because again, you have Anthony Edwards. He can play as like a point guard hybrid a little bit while Dillingham kind of comes into his own. Matter of fact, it's be interesting because Dillingham to me comes off more of as a 2. But if they want him to be more of a 1, you still can have a ball dominant person in Anthony Edwards. Where I'm looking at is what McDaniels can help do for you on both sides of the basketball to take the burden off of Edwards having to defend at a high level like he always has to do on a night in, night out basis. If McDaniels now becomes a little bit more consistent, I think now you can let Edwards cook. Let him go out there and kind of do his thing. And then you still have Dante DiVincenzo, who has played kind of a point guardish, type from time to time when he was playing with Golden State. I think he can do the same thing as well. But not throughout the whole thing.
I think where you can get play creation is still from Julius Randle, where he obviously showed those shots in New York and New Orleans previously to that. So do they start putting the ball in his hand a little bit more? He's not having to look for a shot. So maybe
as long as he's willing to give.
Yeah.
As long as he's willing to give.
And a deep, maybe a deeper cut too, but Terrence Shannon Jr., somebody who I'm interested in to kind of see what they do with him, if he can, soak up some rotation minutes. But when I go back to Denver, I just think, while you're relying on air quote continuity from Minnesota, I'm relying on the reinforcements that Denver has brought in, inclusive of, trying to spell maybe Jamal Murray maybe a little bit more as well too. At Bruce Brown playing, kind of a de facto point forward type position. Aaron Gordon obviously will be able to defend, I think, some of your Anthony Edwards and that, but also that's what they have Cameron Johnson there for, right? Michael Porter Jr., despite his size, wasn't really banking on that. Like, he did some things because he had the size, but he wasn't overly bought in defensively. Cameron Johnson knows that that's a role that he can play in addition to, being kind of a spot up shooter in the 3. And then also you can't forget Julian Strawther and guys like that who they want to try to give some more minutes to, Peyton Watson as well. In addition to Tim Hardaway Jr. So you just name off all these guys, and Valanciunas is a guy who I think can play with Jokic in some minutes too. So Denver, I think, did a lot to improve their overall floor that will also raise their ceiling by getting more depth on this team than Minnesota did as a collective.
Well, to your point, right? So I'm not saying that they needed to find one player to fill in the void of losing Michael Porter Jr. Actually, I think what they've done, benefits the Denver Nuggets and why you easily could have them as a contender. And I'm only saying maybe taking that step back. I think I'm looking more at Aaron Gordon and seeing if Aaron Gordon shows me what he gave me in the second half of the year for the duration of the year, we're in a good space, and I will eat my words. And Shaw, they should very much rightfully be there. But we remember seeing the struggles when he came off of his injury and how long it took him, right? Even Malone had him benched for quite, for a period of time before he started really kind of, turning that corner. And I think, again, a lot of that comes down to how much patience does all of this start to come together. We've seen iterations of Jamal Murray disappearing in certain moments in games. We're not even talking about the playoffs. We're just talking about through the course of the regular season. Remember, the Denver Nuggets at one point were a top 2 team, right, hanging around. And then as soon as we got on the back end of the NBA All-Star Weekend, they went into like a serious rut and essentially took themselves out of that circumstance, right? And again, too much reliance on Jokic. So to your point, if collectively this team can step up and play to what Jokic helps give you, then no question. But those are new pieces being added, and we'll see how quickly they can fit into that fold, so to speak. Because to your point, I'm relying more on the fact that the Minnesota Timberwolves do have another year to get better at what they can give you offensively, along with what they've already been doing defensively under Finch.
Well, and I think also to not pseudo bear the lead when it comes to Denver too, and changing their coach over, and moving on from Michael Malone. And so now Ottoman has his opportunity to just like, hey, full season,
I didn't get an opportunity to see what he did. Yeah.
I want to see. They gave OKC a run for their money in the playoffs. Like I said, that was a 7-game series, for all intents and purposes. So listen, this Nuggets team, I think is going to be heard from in the Western Conference, and presumably with the Jokic, I'd say probably having to do maybe slightly less because there's more depth on their team. So that shouldn't force them to play the 40, because we all talk about the non-Jokic minutes. Like, what does Denver do? They have the ability to sustain that, I think, in a lot better way now too. But just like how I'm worried about Mike Conley, I'm glad you brought up Jamal Murray. I'm still worried about him because he's spotty at best. He's obviously, no, I shouldn't say that. That's complete disrespect to Jamal Murray. He's not spotty, but I think that in terms of what we perceive him to be, right, as this near max level guy, we don't always get that level of consistency, and that's why he's yet to be an all-star. But he performs well, usually in the playoff spotlight, but it's just not the same level of consistency throughout. And I'm a little worried about like his injury history and Denver's ability to kind of cover some of that up. But that's why they got as much stuff that they did. So I think Contenders, this is a great conversation for both Minnesota and Denver to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. And last point, Shaw, and then I'll get your prediction of who you think basically walks away from the West, so to speak. But to your point, if what you're telling me is, hey, getting those quality minutes from Hardaway, getting those quality minutes from Braun, as far as scoring capabilities, where it's not on the onus of Jokic to do what he showed us in for the last couple of years, then yeah, I am completely on board with you and things of that nature. But it's just hard sell for me because we've been waiting where this is just, it's the bottom line is this is what we're getting from Jamal Murray and things of that nature. And again, it could be injuries. It just could be, whatever it is. It's just like, I just don't know if I can buy into it another year of that aspect of it unless I see it coming out the gate. Like, this is exactly like, I'm me, I'm him, I'm that dude, I'm doing that. This is what I do. You get what I mean? So that's where I'm on that. All right. So, that being said, all of that chitter chatter and banter, who you got coming out the West?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's a long conversation for me to just go with the defending champions as the team that's going to come out of the Western Conference. I do think Houston is going to be heard from. I think I'd slightly put Denver slightly above Houston right now after the Fred VanVleet injury, and just that's just my opinion. So I think we get a very competitive series ultimately with Denver and OKC. But I'm really banking on what I said earlier in Chet Holmgren taking another leap. Jalen Williams as well too, but even just having Chet for the entire of the year, I think he learned how to play in the finals and understand, like, let me be a rim defender. Let me be a defender first, and my offense will come. I have guys who can create for me. I don't need to force the issue there. And I think, while Dagnall is very low key in terms of his press conferences and stuff like that, he has that team locked in and dialed in. So I got the Thunder, but I think Nuggets are going to push them more than maybe some people are even giving Denver credit for right now. What about you?
I think we're going to get a repeat of the Western Conference Finals.
Minnesota and OKC. Okay.
In OKC. I listen. We'll do our award show, but I have I have Anthony Edwards as dark horse favorite to win this thing, man. I just there's something about what I'm sensing. You know, if he gets his ultra aggressive and uber, you know, diabolic as I think he can be capable of, this Minnesota Timberwolves team is going to be a tough out in the playoffs. But that being said, Shaw, I don't snuff anything with what the Houston Rockets and Denver Nuggets can bring to the table. I think any of these three teams can take the Oklahoma City Thunder. But at the end of the day, defense, again, that's been my mantra all the time. Defense wins championships. And if Oklahoma City executes the level of defense that they showed us throughout the course of last year, going into the NBA finals and everything like that, they are going to easily, again, find themselves playing for another, as a championship, defending their crown. But any slippage, and any one of these teams can get them.
I think
like
but the funniest thing about OKC is that they still did, like, their regular season success was still done with so much distress, right? And without Hartenstein being out there for a good part of the year, we already talked about, Chet Holmgren as well. And I think you forget that Cason Wallace is still pretty young and can still grow and become a better player than we've seen them be, right? And they had their young rookie who missed all of last year, and now he's going to be back as well too. So I just listen, OKC to me, bro.
They're locked and loaded. They are. They are locked and loaded. And that's the reason why it's hard for me to just walk away from what I saw from them and what they brought to the table. Because if they allow their offense to thrive, how it can potentially thrive, ain't nobody beating them. Yeah. Ain't no version of the Eastern Conference or Western Conference is going to be able to handle what they can do. But again, some teams, after they win that championship, and we saw this with the Boston Celtics, what got them there, what got them to win it all, was that they had a dominating, defense. And their offense stepped up and hit shots when they needed to, and they forced the other team's best players to show up short in critical moments. Oklahoma City Thunder executes that same kind of way. Nobody's beating them. But, we've seen teams take a step back. They don't put as much priority on their defensive prowess as they did the year before. And that level of slippage is not something that you just see in statistics. It's just in their level of execution and detail and who they have out there on the basketball court and what the mentality is a year after winning the chip. So,
yes, sir. Well, I think this was a great one. Western Conference preview, all 15 teams going in from the lottery all the way to we feel like is going to be contenders. And there's a lot of variance here, I think, in the West. So we'd love to hear from you all. Let us know what you think. Who do we mess up? Did we disrespect our team or did we appropriately rate? And let us know here on the Baseline NBA podcast, man. This has been a fun Western Conference preview.
Absolutely, man. And once again, we appreciate everybody for hopping on board with us for the Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for hopping on board with us this week, and we'll catch up with you next time.